What up, yo? Welcome to another reaction from me, Moody Montana. You know what I mean? Y'all smooth thinking with Moody Montana. You know what it is. I mean, hit that like and subscribe button. You know what I mean? Let's go. You know what I mean? Here, right here, I was looking at the Conjuring, the movie The Conjuring. Like, I know it's true. You know what I mean? It's based off of true stories. Off of Ed and Lorraine Warren. You know what I mean? God bless the dead. Yo, they went through some shit, yo. Rudy's born, they went through some shit in this lifetime. You know what I mean? Like, and I salute them for real. But yo, like I said, I never really like got into like they real footages until like just now. You know what I mean? And I wanted to share that with y'all. Like, this is my reaction to it. It's like crazy. Like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, check this out. This is just like real footage from uh Poltergeist and other shit. You know what I mean? Like, they was involved in it. I mean, pay to watch this.
Her mouth wasn't moving.
Make sure y'all hit that like and subscribe, man.
Ed, no, 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 hold your, let me on that. No, give me. No, the wrong toe. No. Yeah, I'll do it. Hey, don't hold a lower.
I think people thought at first that I was doing it deliberately. So tests were done.
Mr. Gross filled her mouth up with water when we all was watching, and the voice was still talking. And Mr. Gross asked him, "Where are you from?"
I come from the grave.
We are in the actual graveyard where Bill Wilkins is actually buried.
Mum, she's watching over us.
The expression on my mum's face is just how she used to look at me.
I felt sorry for the kids because everyone had to be there to see it, from Cambridge professors to TV companies. There was even one, there was a ventriloquist, was invited along to the house to see if Janet was making sounds herself and, this sort of stuff.
There were so many witnesses and so many people had seen things.
With the media there, reporters, investigators.
This shit gotta freak you out if you see some shit like that happen to your kids, right? And you know damn well they ain't your motherfucking kids. And you got these people coming in and you asking for help, and they coming in, oh, send this person in to see if they lying. Sending you like, motherfucker, help. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck?
There was no privacy anymore. Our lives weren't our own.
My name's Kent Allen. We're with the television news program Wide Angle. I was hoping to have a word with you about the disturbance.
This family became minor celebrities at the time, and this wasn't just a family off by themselves, off in the woods with nobody around. This was a council house in the middle of London. It was the house that you would never think that was haunted, and inside were these people living this nightmare.
There was a buzz that went around that Ed and Lorraine were coming over from the States to witness, what was happening in the house. I remember that everyone thought, wow, this is fantastic. This is really interesting that someone's going to, really bothered to do so much, to come so far.
I've done research all over the world. I never charged for anything I did. What happened wasn't good. I needed to help them.
When Ed and Lorraine come to the house, to me it felt like some sort of comfort had arrived for the first time.
Ed and Lorraine exemplify, especially in the 70s, your neighborhoods, how people weren't so afraid to help each other. You just did it because it was the right thing to do.
Lorraine has cited this particular case as being one of the most terrifying of her career.
What's your name? I never thought anything like that would happen to me.
She said, there's definitely some spirit here. And she said, I feel it's not always good. And she said, I wouldn't say it was very evil, but she said, I'm very worried about it.
Lorraine has always said to me, she goes, I know that this gig is ordained. You know, it was meant to be, and like it or not, you know, I gird up. And despite the fear and despite the weariness, there was never any doubt for her.
You can see it's the house, there's no doubt about it.
We had Margaret and Janet come back and visit us while we were shooting.
This is my mother's bedroom. She always had a chair in the corner here. And it's very much like her room was.
But not the actor.
This is a recreation of the room which she slept on. It really brings back memories.
It was the first time they had seen Lorrain, who was on set the same day, in 38 years.
This is Margaret and Janet.
Oh my God! Oh my goodness!
Oh, I loved it to see you. We've seen you in the films as well. In the other films, I watched you.
You were kids.
I know. We never forgot.
Thank you.
It was an extremely emotional reunion for all of them because they remember Lorrain and Ed so fondly and how they had truly tried to help the Hodgson family, not just with the supernatural elements, but just help them as a family.
Out of their repertoire of cases that they've investigated of their lifetime, this is one of their most interesting ones. Because of the nature of it, the Hodgson family have their fair shares of fans and skeptics.
Our principal characters here are all children, and children can be very ingenious pranksters.
Anita Gregory, I've always despised her and resented her because she said it was a complete fake.
My girl didn't make this up. What? No. But I've seen things.
She was caught red-handed faking an event. Obviously, this family, if it was a hoax or not, was in great distress, okay? I think that we can agree on. And whatever the reason, like, I can totally respect that and be like, I'm so sorry that for whatever reason you felt this way and this kind of stuff was happening.
No one could fake something like that. They'd have to be a very good 11-year-old actor.
This is my house. No, it's not.
And there is that question of, did something really happen or not? There are a lot of believers that really believe something did happen, and there's some people that feel that the girls were putting something on. But there is enough evidence that's irrefutable that makes us feel like something was really strongly going on there.
Don't you see it?
See what?
I don't think I'll ever be able to put a closure on it because the memories will always be there. It will never go. It's such a big impact on my childhood.
At the end of the day, it didn't just taper off. It burns itself out. You know, it gets to the point where things weren't happening. So just ended up as a complete mystery as it started.
I'm very grateful for giving us the chance to tell our true story.
Now, I gotta get y'all to listen to this shit and look at these pictures and everything. This is an interview with Ed and Lorraine, and they talking about the Amityville horror, the Amityville house. You feel me? Like, for real, man. Like, yo, this shit is interesting, man. Make sure y'all hit that like and subscribe, though. Fuck with me, I'm telling you, yo. And give me some type of, like, you know, like, am I going the right way? You know what I mean? Like, talk to me. You know what I mean? Hit them comments, man. Like, is this a good enough avenue for us? You know what I mean? Let me know. But listen to what they got to say, man.
I want to make it clear at the beginning of this program that Lorraine and I do not back up the movie or the book. Mm-hmm. It was much more horrific than either. You didn't have to take a literary license in a book or dramatic license in a movie. This case had everything. It had the monstrosities of the night which roamed that house, which infested it, which caused a young man to murder his whole family. Ronald DeFeo is now serving 6 consecutive life sentences at Dannemora Prison. But you know, Amityville horror goes way back before the Lutz family, who moved in there and bought the house later and fled 28 days later. It goes back 6 months before the DeFeos were murdered. Mr. DeFeo went up to Montreal, Canada. He went to a shrine where many miracles had occurred. A lot of people don't know this. He went to that shrine and he brought back from there a priest, an exorcist, who said masses in the house. Why? If this was a hoax that was created by the Lutz family, why 6 months before this man was murdered and his family was an exorcist in that house? While the priest was saying a mass and performed the exorcism rituals, candles were blowing out, doors were opening and closing. There were footsteps all around the house. Ronald DeFeo, who was the murderer of his family, fled the house. He didn't stay there. He did not want to stay there while the priest was in that house. What caused him to leave? Obsession? Possession? Who can say? We do know that this young man did murder every member of his family in that house, shot them to death. On November 13th, 1974, 3:15 in the morning, he had a high-powered rifle. Now, when you see the photographs later, and these are the only pictures ever taken inside the Amityville horror house, because Lorraine and I and just a handful of other investigators actually went in there. I've heard people on TV say, I was in that house, I was in that house, I investigated. They never were. They don't have any evidence, they have no proof. We have the proof, and you'll see that proof tonight. They will see the only photographs ever taken in the house itself at the time of the investigation, and as the Lutzes left that home, completely furnished, they didn't take one thing with them. They left everything there, and they went off to California. Because Father Pecoraro, who many people said did not exist, talked with Lorraine and I. He told us all the horrible things that happened to him. We sat with him, he was as close as I am to you, Tony, at dinner, at Kathy Lutz's mother's home in Deer Park. He told me things that the public has never heard about. And tonight, we are going to endeavor to explain what really happened in that home.
Okay, Lorraine, I know you went in the house and you experienced things, but can we just go over how you first were called into the house? Like, who was the gentleman that, or people that called you in? Was it the Lutzes that called you in?
No, it was not, Tony. It was Marvin Scott who called us in. He told us there had been a tragedy in that home. He didn't go into detail regarding it. He told us that it was a prominent family. He also told us during that very first conversation that the family that were living there at the present time had fled and left all of their possessions behind. And their viewers were very interested in the history of that house and what exactly might be wrong with the home. That's how we first became involved. Now, I had to tell Marvin Scott at that time that there was no way that we could go in that home without an invitation and permission from the family, which came very readily. But realize, when we met with George Lutz, not Kathy, because Kathy and the children were not there. When we met with George, he wouldn't go anywhere near the house. He met us at a pizza parlor and sat with us and talked because he was so frightened.
Well, I understand that George wasn't really he was a no-nonsense kind of a guy,
He was
right?
really a no-nonsense man.
George Lutz was an ex-Marine. He was a karate expert. He ran around with motorcycle gangs. We're not talking about any altar boy here. We're talking about a rough, tough guy who, after 28 days in that house, fled, left everything behind, took his wife and children, and went off to California.
See, he was the type of person, Tony, that felt like he had to always be in control. He would go out on the landings. It was 3 stories high. The home is very beautiful. The interior of the home is very formal and it's very beautiful. And he would go out and he would take his fist and he would tell what was there, or command what was there, to come out so he could fight it. Because as far as he was concerned, he was very skeptical regarding the fact that anything paranormal was going on. At the time that this first began, he found it difficult because of his background to even believe in a God, never mind believe that something of this nature was taking place. But I have to say this, the Amityville case affected our personal lives more than any case we ever worked on.
Really?
It was, yes.
How? In what way?
Well, it was to follow us home the very first day. The very first night that Ed and I went to that home, it was the middle of the night when we came home. And I had contacted many priests. I was fearful, but Tony, I didn't know what I was fearful of. I mean, it was just another case. It wasn't the Amityville horror. So I really didn't know what I was so fearful of. But on the other hand, I took with me a relic of a very pious priest, and I asked many clergy of different faiths to enter that home with us in spirit, and to, you know, their prayers to protect us. But when we arrived back at our home, about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, Ed took his briefcase and things that he had with him, and he brought them down to his office. Now, I got in bed, and I took a book to bed with me on the life of Padre Pio, the priest whose relic I carried, a man who I have tremendous devotion to, a very holy and pious monk priest from Italy, Giovanni Rotonda, Italy. And something about that cheerful room wasn't so cheerful anymore. It felt ominous to me.
Actually, Ed, I understand that there were other people in the house with you, but did other people take photographs?
No. It was only our photographer from the New England Society for Psychic Research that was taking pictures. And we took over 200 photographs that day, which I'm very happy about, because as I said, these are the only photographs ever taken in that home. And I think when we get to next week's program, or the next show I should say, that when they see these psychic pictures, one of a spirit child gazing out of one of the bedrooms where the children were murdered, and then one of Padre Pio, the man that Lorraine is talking about, who was a stigmatist for over 50 years, had fought the devil many times in his life.
Can you explain stigmata to us?
Stigmata is a person who suffers the wounds of Christ. The crucifixion of the hands, the legs, the feet, the crowns on the head. But he suffered this for over 50 years and fought the devil, not only spiritually, but physically many times. That's why Lorraine had this feeling that she should call on him to help us in this house. And we didn't even know how bad it was that day, but as she said, George Lutz wouldn't even go to that home. He said, there's no way I'm going into the house. And when I asked him at this restaurant where we met him, I said, Mr. Lutz, what happened to you in that house? He didn't say anything. He just looked at me. He said, you know. I said, I don't know, Mr. Lutz. I said, what happened to you in the house? He looked at me again. He said, you know. I said, I really don't know. I was getting a little irritated because I wanted to find out what kind of experiences this man had, but he was actually afraid to talk about what happened for fear that it would happen again, because at his mother-in-law's house at Deer Park, when Kathy himself and the mother-in-law would start talking about what happened there, things would happen in the house at Deer Park. In fact,
because
George
of the
and Kathy
recognition.
levitated in that house, too.
Yes,
They levitated.
They
Oh,
levitated. Both. They had phenomena follow them from Amityville. Now, Tony, we know this happens. We know that even ourselves, involved in research, that you go to a location where haunting phenomena is going on, active phenomena, and you leave and go home, and you give it a lot of recognition, or you listen to the tapes, and like while you're still programmed, then
something can come to you.
Yes.
In fact, you know, when we went into the house, Tony, Lorraine went with the camera crew, and you'll see the pictures coming up now. If we can show a picture of the Amityville home as it was, and then you'll see the interior of the house, and where I had a terrible experience down in the basement. And what had occurred was, as a religious demonologist, I do carry a crucifix, I carry holy water.
Right.
These are the weapons of Catholicism where the diabolical are concerned. And it's my intention to go into a home like that and to provoke what's there. Because I'm not a clairvoyant. I can't see clairvisually or hear clairaudiently. I must provoke what's there.
Okay, what are we looking
now, this,
at here?
of course, is the sign of Amityville here, which actually means a friendly village.
Oh, boy.
But unfortunately, it wasn't too friendly after a while. If we could see the next picture now of the house.
Okay.
And you'll see the home as it was when we investigated it. You know, they've changed the architecture of the home, the design of it, taking the windows out, changed the numbers and everything. And I don't blame them because of the vandals.
Yes. We don't blame
So
them
in other words,
at all.
people wouldn't even recognize it today, huh?
Now, in the book, it tells about the well being inside the house. There's the well you see right there at the corner.
Right in the front there?
Right in the front there.
They got a picture of the
And
little
that
girl
doorway
she's on
was
the
the
roof.
doorway that George Lutz said had been ripped open one night. That's right in the front there. And we could see markings and so forth on the door. But remember, when he made statements like, we walked up the staircase, and this is the way they put it in the book. We walked up the staircase, and suddenly the banister exploded before our very eyes. Well, when we went in that house, there was no banister that exploded.
Right.
What they should have said was, as they walked up the staircase, the banister suddenly exploded through telepathic hypnosis.
Okay.
In other words, if we were in a haunted house right now, Tony, we might see that table explode, and yet a couple of minutes later, it would be fully intact. It was a telepathic projection to us, bypassing the physical eye and going into the mind's eye or the third eye. But they didn't explain that.
Okay. If we could have that next slide, and Ed will explain and Lorraine will explain exactly what we're looking at here. That would be
As we go through the slides, okay, here's the boathouse.
That's the rear of the Amityville home. And as you can see, this is extremely valuable property. Believe it or not, that home, Tony, was sold for $50,000 to this family. Now, you're looking at the boathouse right on the Amityville River, and up in the back is the house itself.
Yeah, but
that
this
is
is
the
where the Shinnecock Indians had an enclosure.
Yes.
That's where it all started, with the Shinnecock Indians. They had an enclosure right there where they put the sick, the mad, and the dying. Demonic spirits, evil spirits, are drawn to the sufferings of human beings. And this already had an aura of disaster about it.
Now, in the background there, that is the back of the Amityville home.
The white building.
The white building, yes.
All right. Now, if we can see the next picture.
The next picture, I believe, is going to go into some of the interior shots.
No,
this is John Ketchum. This is a statue of John
Without
Ketchum.
a head.
Well, John Ketchum was the man who built a small cottage right there where the Amityville home is at the present time. And after his, or prior to his death, he had said that he wanted to be buried on that land. Now, he was ousted from Salem for his witchcraft practices. So he didn't have exactly a good track record. Now, people that purchased the property after his death claimed that haunting phenomena occurred there. Now, it was moved, Tony. It was moved to a location a couple of blocks away, and the thing is that Amityville home was built there in 1928, and no family that ever lived in that home was ever a happy family.
See on the monitor, it'll be coming up shortly. If Ed, you could explain what this picture is.
Oh, yes. I told you before how Mr. DeFeo had gone up to Montreal, Canada, at the St. Joseph Shrine and brought back a priest with him to exorcise the house. But he also had special blessed statues made that he surrounded the house with. Now, why did he do that? He was not known for being a pious man in any means. He brought him back because something very horrifying was going on in that house. That's why The Exorcist, and that's why these statues.
And you know what, Tony? This is amazing. People were curious regarding why this family had religious statues all over the yard. And they inquired, and DeFeo, Mr. DeFeo Sr., told the neighbors that he had a devil on his back.
Now, you were called in by, you also, a newspaper man invited you in, too. What was his name? Oh, here's the picture of him now.
Oh, you mean Marvin Scott? That's Marvin Scott, Tony.
Okay.
He was an anchorman on Channel 5.
On Channel 5.
Okay, so he was there with his camera crew and everything?
Oh, yes. And his camera crew, who had filmed in combat assignments, became very badly affected in this house, had severe heart palpitations. In fact, a lot of people were very badly affected that night, that very first night in the home.
So the next picture, I think we're going to see George and Kathy.
Yes, there's George
I
and
want you to
Kathy.
look at this guy, Tony. Does he look like a guy that you'd want to fool around with? No way.
Not at all.
No.
George is a rough, tough guy, and
Yes.
he doesn't leave behind everything he owns in this world just
No.
on a fluke or on a hope that somebody might write a book about a haunted house.
No, that's for sure.
Kathy was as beautiful as he was tough.
Mhm.
And even today, she's a very religiously oriented woman. The Lutz family, if our viewers out there could know them as Lorraine and I knew them, we lived with them for 2 weeks out in California. They are a beautiful family.
Oh,
Now, how many
yes.
children did they have?
They had 3 at the time. They have
Okay.
since had 2 more children. But Kathy, these were the first 3, Tony, were Kathy's children.
Okay, there they are.
Yes, there's Chris and John and Missy. Now, Missy, the little girl in the middle, to talk to these young children as they would talk to Ed and I, very candidly sharing things with us. They were terrified of what was in that house. But the little girl, the youngest of the 3 children, was very candid about talking about her friends in Amityville, and what she was referring to would be this Jody the pig and like that would come in and sit on the rocking chair in her room and rock. To her, they were friends.
Now keep in mind that when we go into a home, you know, these people are telling us these horrible stories, but we have to ourselves experience this before we accept it.
Right.
We have to see it, we have to feel it. We have to know it's there before we say, yes, this home is haunted. And this home was not haunted by anything human. It was inhuman. Many people ask us about that. It was inhuman, and then they say, well, people went in there later and lived there, nothing ever happened to them. Well, who's to say that the house was not exorcised?
Okay, Ed, how do you know it was something inhuman versus something like an earthbound
By the
spirit?
powers.
By the powers of
Remember
what
the
was
first
there.
time I went in that house, I went downstairs into
Yeah.
the basement. I used religious provocation. I ordered in the name of Jesus Christ what was there. I commanded it in that name of Christ to reveal its identity. Within seconds, I could feel what I can only describe as being under a waterfall, pressure, pushing me down to the floor. Then I could feel hundreds of pinpoints of electricity hitting my body. And then, as though they took a hot towel, wet towel, and dropped it right over my face, I couldn't breathe. That's the experience I had, and I went into what we call religious resistance. I then envisioned myself in a Christ light as a Christian, as a Catholic, and I again commanded it to leave in the name of Jesus Christ. It immediately lifted off. I knew right at that point what we were dealing with, and I said to myself, I don't think I'll ever come back in this house again. Because I felt that a house isn't worth a person's life.
Now, this is during the period of time, Tony, what you're looking at, that I was asked if I would try to communicate something that was so dangerous for me to do.
Okay, so who's the gentleman in the middle?
That's Dr. Brian Riley, a parapsychologist from England, and a very good friend of ours, and that's Marvin Scott.
Was there any other doctors or any other professionals in the house?
Yes.
Alex Tannis.
Dr. Brian Riley, Dr. Alex Tannis, Dr.
Carlos Osis.
Carlos Osis was also in the home that night. There were many professional people in that home that night, Tony,
This is a
giving
picture
their
of
evaluation.
the camera crew focusing in on Lorraine as she's coming up the stairs.
That's
but this
infrared.
next shot,
That's an infrared
these are all
shot?
infrared
Yes,
shots.
it is infrared, yes.
This next shot will show Lorraine on a staircase where she was already picking up what I was experiencing downstairs. If we can see that next picture.
Okay, the next one's coming up.
Okay, now, Tony, when Ed tells you about going down into the basement area, him and I separated at this point, and I'm going up the stairs. I don't realize that he is not behind me. And as I'm going up the stairs, Tony, it was the worst feeling. It was like I was going against a tremendous pressure that was on my body. I stopped on the landing and held tight to the relic that was in my hand and asked for strength and direction in going forward. And it seemed like my prayers were answered. And at that point, I continued on up the few stairs and turned immediately to my left, went into what was then known as the sewing room.
Okay, I think that shot's coming up.
Right there, Tony, yes. And I stood in the middle of the room. I looked at Marvin Scott, and I said, I hope this is as close to hell as I'll ever get.
This is the room where the priest heard the voice tell him to get out, where they seen the hundreds of flies. And even though I'm not a clairvoyant, I'm not a sensitive, when I walked into that room, I could feel it. Now you notice that in all these pictures, everything is there. Ironing boards, curtains, dishes, expensive furniture. You'll see the clothing of the children, their toys that they left behind.
Now, believe it or not, Tony, that is the bed that Mr. and Mrs. DeFeo were shot to death in.
You're kidding.
No, a lot of the furnishings in that home were from the DeFeo estate that the Lutzes purchased. So it showed where their belief system was.
This is also the bed from which George and Kathy found themselves levitating.
Oh, yeah.
They were about 2 foot from the ceiling, and George looked at Kathy and he said, do you believe this? And that's when they fell to the bed again.
Oh,
now,
yes.
you told me before that the house was as if I had left my house this evening.
Exactly.
That's exactly how it was.
I think the next shot would probably illustrate.
There's some of the
freezer
foodstuffs in the freezer.
In the freezer.
I mean, they left behind everything, everything to eat, everything to drink, all their clothing, their bedding. When we went to Deer Park, to Kathy's mother's home, they were sleeping on mattresses on the floor.
Yes.
They had beds here with. Look at here. You see the towels. You see all the bathroom things.
The clothing, Tony.
Everything.
Rare collections they had inherited from grandparents, the deeds to their property, the baptismal records, their marriage certificates, nothing. They didn't take a thing other than the clothes on their back when they fled that home.
Now, the next shot, I think, Ed, you told me was the red room?
Yes, this is what they refer to as the red room. It's actually a cubby hole that goes in probably about 8 or 9 feet. It's about 7 foot high by 4 foot. But this is the room in which we believe Ronald DeFeo kept the items that he used in witchcraft. Witchcraft and rituals, drugs played a big part in the murders that occurred here. In the next picture, you'll see some witchcraft items, things that Ronald DeFeo had in the house and so forth.
Are those some of the items right there?
Those are some of the items there you see. And we know that this young man was obsessed or possessed by something demonic. He hated his father, but he loved his mother. He loved his sisters and his brothers. Why did he kill them? He said there was a dark form next to him that just kept him going. We call that a shadow ghost.
Shadow ghost.
And it was this here that goaded Ronald DeFeo into killing every member of his family. This is a large ceramic lion that Kathy had given George for Christmas. And on 2 occasions, this played an important role. One night, they woke up around 3:15 when they heard what they described as the marching band downstairs. They felt a heavy weight on their legs. George put the light on, and it was this statue on their leg. They thought it was their large dog. On another occasion, they were going down the staircase, he was, to investigate the sound of the marching band.
The staircase, I think, is the next shot, in fact.
And as he went down the staircase, he felt something sharp on his left ankle. It was bleeding, and there was the ceramic line just a couple of feet away from him. But this is also the staircase where the green slime was found, which George would collect and throw into the Amityville River. But he thought somebody was sneaking into the house and doing that. Downstairs, way down below there, the foyer, when he would get down there, the music would stop, as he described it. But the furniture was pushed back up against...
And carpet was rolled, Tony.
And the carpets were rolled up.
Yes.
As though somebody were actually marching there.
Now, in the second show that we're going to do, this is part 1 of the Amityville case.
Right, we couldn't
What are we going to be
possibly
looking at? Can you tell us, Ed, what
We're going to be seeing the psychic pictures of a young man. It looks like a young man's face, but actually a diabolical face with luminescent eyes from one of the rooms that the children were murdered in. Then you'll see a photograph showing Padre Pio looking down at Lorraine while she's holding a relic of his. This was the room where the 6 bodies of the DeFeos were laid out. And we'll be going to some of the more terrifying experiences that we went through in that house.
As well as what became our scientific proof that they were telling the truth in that house.
Oh, yes.
Great. So we'll have a real exciting program next
yes.
week. Now, as always, we'd like to reiterate, if someone, Lorraine, I'd like to ask this of you, if someone needs your help, if someone has a problem in their house, they think something's wrong.
Yes.
What how can they contact you? Can you tell us again how
they can contact us by writing to us at Post Office Box 41, Monroe, Connecticut 06468. Or if they even have questions, Tony, that they wish to have us answer that maybe we didn't cover.
We'll be looking forward to our next program. So, tune in again for our next program, part 2 of the...
We ain't gonna do part 2, but god damn, man, like, let me know y'all thing on this. Like, that has to be like, I don't know how they was sleeping at night, cause dealing with that and sleeping. They had a house. They got a house with everything in it. All the shit from all the movies and shit that we seen. But all the cases, they got a basement full of shit locked up in that motherfucker. Hit that like and subscribe button, man. Let me know y'all thoughts on this Ed and Lorraine Warren situation. Appreciate y'all vibing out, smoking, thinking, but moving me, Moody Montana. You know, until next time.